So this morning, as I said, we're going to be moving into Numbers, Leviticus chapter 27, and this will close us out in the book of Leviticus. And there's been a whole lot being said here in Leviticus that God gave to Moses, to the priesthood, and to the people. And chapter 27 is going to have to do with them making vows and promises to the Lord. One of the things to remember, and I'll reiterate this throughout, these vows and promises were of a free will. It had nothing to do with the ceremonial part of the law. This is something that they did, and when they made these vows and promises, God wanted them to keep it. Now, could you redeem a vow or promise? Well, you could. You can pay to redeem it, but if you didn't redeem it within a set period of time, it strictly became the Lord's, okay? And thereby it couldn't be redeemed in the future, okay? So don't know on these vows and things that have a clear picture of what they're doing here with this. A lot of times when you run into this, you meditate on it, you study on it, and I don't know. It's one of those things that they did, one of the things that was approved by God because He regulates their vows. We know there was a Nazirite vow that they could take. We also remember about Hannah and the vow that she made. If the Lord would give her a son, what would she do? She would consecrate him or give him to the Lord for service, wouldn't she? So this ties back in with this. We also have an individual named Japheth that made a rash vow, didn't he? A great general, a great deliverer of Israel. And on one of as he was going out on one of his last conquests, he told the Lord that if he would make him successful, that whatever walked through the doorpost of his house when he came back, that he would sacrifice, okay? So we do see that they did vows. They made promises to the Lord. So those things were accepted. I guess in a spiritual sense today, we make vows and promises to the Lord ourselves, don't we? Such as that when we obey the gospel, I'm going to live for the Lord forever, right? Well, what happens a lot of times when we don't? We fall, don't we? Can we be, in a sense, redeemed back? Yeah, but how do we get redeemed back today? Well, we ask for forgiveness and prayers of the church or whatever, you know. So some of the types and shadows here, this is physical. There's going to be some monetary attachment to it. There's even going to be an allowance somewhat that because this is not a ceremonial sacrifice to the Lord, that's a type of substitution would be allowed. But, there's that three-letter word, Eric. But it carried a 20% tax with it based on what the priest's estimation was. So now you had to make a decision on what you were going to actually do to redeem that vow back. Were you going to use this animal or this thing, or were you going to go ahead and just use the perfect animal? Because here you are, 20% value of tax. That's a lot, isn't it? Okay? So we're going to see that. And so we're not going to spend a whole lot of time with it, but we're going to go through it because I do want to roll over into the book of Numbers. So this is what we're going to be dealing with here this morning. These passages present detailed instructions given by the Lord to Moses regarding the valuation of people, animals, and land when someone makes a special vow or consecration to God. These divine regulations given to Israel emphasize the importance of holiness of the offerings and obedience to God's commandments. So we're going to see that these things were vows that were regarding people. They were special vows and things of that nature that they made. Here again, keep in mind with this chapter, this doesn't have anything to do with the ceremonial law and sacrifices that they made at the tabernacle and temple unto God. This was something that the individuals actually did, okay? So, the conversation is going to go something like this concerning vows. The Lord's firstly, no devoted thing redeemed. That means things that the vow of the redemption time has expired on. Those things now cannot be redeemed. They belong strictly to the Lord. Okay, so. and tithe. And so we're going to touch a little bit on the tithe that they're going to do. Sacred vows and valuations, guidelines for dedication to the Lord. The passages inspire us to remember the sanctity of our commitment to God and the importance of following His commands. It underscores the principles of obedience, honoring God through our vows, and understanding the value of sacred offerings. The promises of blessings and the fear of penalty both serve as a reminder of God's holy sovereignty. So, valuations of persons. Now, this is really interesting about the valuation of persons involved in this. This had to do with able-bodied people, okay? Those between the years of 20 years of age and somewhat 50 years of age carried a higher value because they could do more manual labor. So they were required to pay a type of tax, if you will, okay, on these things. So with that, Daniel, would you begin with verse 1 of chapter 27? I'll tell you when to stop.
All right. Now the Lord spoke to Moses, saying, "Speak to the children of Israel and say to them, when a man is consecrated by a vow certain persons to the Lord according to your valuation, if your valuation is of a male from 20 years old up to 60 years old, then your valuation shall be 50 shekels of silver, according to the shekel of the sanctuary. If it is a female, then your valuation shall be 30 shekels. And if from 5 years old up to 20 years old, then your valuation for a male shall be 20 shekels, and for a female 10 shekels. And if from a month old up to 5 years old, then your valuation for a male shall be 5 shekels of silver, and for a female the valuation shall be 3 shekels of silver. And if from 60 years old and above, if it is a male, then your valuation shall be 15 shekels, and for a female 10 shekels. But if he is too poor to pay your valuation, then he shall present himself before the priest, and the priest shall set a value for him, according to the ability of him who vowed. The priest shall value him. If it is an animal that men may bring as an offering to the Lord, all that anyone gives to the Lord shall be holy.
Okay, stop right there. Okay, so here we have some estimation of value of redemption on these vows. There is a chart on this, and I failed to put it in the overhead to kind of break this down so you could get a better picture of it. But what's going on here, a man from 20 to 60 years of age, if consecrated to the Lord by a vow, might be redeemed for 50 shekels, which amounted to about 10 pounds sterling. So this is what's going on here dealing with these vows and the redemption of these vows. I'm going to briefly read the paragraph out of the commentary that I have here with me pertaining to this, okay? And maybe this will help get our minds kind of separated from the ceremonial type and the personal type of things that's going on here. When a man shall make a singular vow, the verse is short and obscure and may be translated thus: a man who shall have separated a vow according to thy estimations of the souls unto the Lord, which may be paraphrased thus: he who shall have vowed or consecrated the soul, a living creature, whether man or beast, if he wish to redeem what he has thus vowed or consecrated, he shall ransom or redeem it according to the priest's estimation. So this is what all this is about. A lot of times on the Jewish style of doing these things, I'll just be honest with you on this chapter 27, I don't know that I have a clear picture of what's going on here with these vows and this redemption, okay? Some of you that have studied it might, and I'm open for conversation on it, but this is one of those types of things that you study and you look at and you study and you look at and you think, don't go still that I got my mind wrapped around it, okay? But we're going to go through it and see what we can do about these vows. So anyway, this is what we're looking at on verses 1 through 8. Guidelines are established for the evaluation of males and females of various age in the context of making special vows to the Lord. Provisions are made for those who can't afford the set valuation. So one of the things that you notice in this is God has established this redemption. It's all based on ability. A child's ability for the parent to pay for that child based on its ability to work in this particular case has to do with the agricultural setting of Israel, was not as much as an able-bodied worker, was it? So really he's looking at the value of how you're able to work in this setting, okay? You know, here again, men between the age of 20 and 50, that's pretty much the prime, isn't it? Pretty much what you can do in manual labor is going to fall somewhere in that bracket, isn't it? Probably if it's a lot of heavy manual labor, somewhere between the 20 and 40 bracket, realistically, okay? If a man has made a vow and wanted to redeem it, he would come to the priest. He would set the value of the redemption based upon ability. Now, that's kind of like the sacrificing and the ceremonial side of this thing, isn't it? God had a set standard that he wanted in it, but he also made provisions for those that were up, and the term here is poorer, those that maybe not could afford to do that, okay? So has God still provided a way for everyone based on what? Their ability, isn't it? Based on their ability. And so we find it is with this, God does not leave anybody out in the ability to redeem a vow that they've made. Consecration and valuation of animals and houses, verses 9 through 13. Reed, do you have that?
Now, if it is an animal of the kind which men can present as an offering to the Lord, any such that one gives to the Lord shall be holy. He shall not replace it or exchange it, good for a bad, or bad for a good. For if he does exchange animal for animal, then both it and its substitute shall become holy. If, however, it is any unclean animal of the kind which men do not present as an offering to the Lord, then you shall place the animal before the priest. The priest shall value it as either good or bad. As you, the priest, value it, so it shall be. But if he should ever wish to redeem it, then he shall add 1/5 of it to your valuation.
Okay, so see, now here we're getting into things about these vows, about the valuation. What if it's something that you wanted to give for redemption of the vow, but maybe it didn't meet the standard that was set down? Could you still redeem it? Yeah, but what did you have to pay? 20% more, right? So here again, you were going to put some valuation in to your redemption on these things. So one of the things that's interesting is verse 10, he shall not alter it. Whatsoever was consecrated to God by vow purpose of the Lord was considered from that moment as the Lord's property. To change, which was impiety, to withhold it, sacrilege. So that belonged to the Lord at that point. Could it be redeemed back? Yes, right.
Going back quickly, quick question here, and it's kind of off topic a little bit. Talk about vows. This passage right here would kind of lead to the belief that Jephthah's daughter was not actually offered as a burnt sacrifice. Because she would not have been acceptable to the Lord, so he would have had to provide a substitute, but she would have still been holy and would not have been able to do that in the latter days as a
And that is a very good point. Did, in some of the systems here that we're seeing, was she redeemed somehow from that vow? That's a good question. It doesn't.
Because he would have been able to, he would have had to bring her to the priest as the object of the vow to be offered to the Lord, and it would have not been acceptable.
Right.
So he not being a priest would have been able to actually offer her as a sacrifice. He wouldn't have been able to.
He could bring her to the priest and let him assess it.
Right.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. So, and I know there's some
A little bit, that's sort of
Yeah, and I know there's a lot of discussion about Japheth and that vow and what went on there. Could she have been redeemed by some valuation of a priest somewhere? It's possible because this is showing that they did do that, okay? That the valuation of redemption was there. Although when you go and read that, it does not say that. Now, Ryan and I are going to be a little bit of a, not necessarily a disagreement because this is Bible study. Myself in my studies, I believe he had her sacrificed, okay? Does it say that? Not in so many words, no. Is there something in this valuation system of redeeming a vow that she may have been redeemed by a priest somehow? That's there. Does it really say?
Verse 4 says that she'd be worth 30 shekels.
Do what now?
Verse 4 says she'd be worth 30 shekels.
If you go by the vow, but if you go by that structure, that is correct, right? Okay? So when you get into that thing with Japheth, there is a lot of discussion on it, okay, about whether he did actually carry out the sacrifice or whether her value was redeemed by this structure of a vow, okay? I guess if you look at it, there's a lot of things that can be said both ways on it, okay? So I think that's one of those things that we just have to study and meditate on and keep thinking about it. Like I say, on this chapter 27, out of all this, do I have a clear picture in my mind what's going on here with these vows? I don't. Did they do it? Yes. Did God regulate it? Yes. Okay. Well, there's redemption value made to these vows. Yes. Now, I think we can all agree on that particular point of it, you know. So, like Ryan said, if you want to look at it and just take a look at it, is there a possibility of redemption there? Yes. You know, there is. You can't rule that out. You can't ignore that when you take a look at this, okay? I don't know if that's an answer to your question, but that's kind of what we see in it as far as that goes. Any other brethren have any comments on that? Okay, all right. So, the consecration and valuation of animals and houses, verses 9 through 13, Daniel just read that, and so here again is talking about these evaluations. Now, what I found real interesting, under the ceremonial law, it was pretty specific that you could not offer anything unclean, wasn't it? You couldn't offer a donkey, could you? No, sirree. Under this system, because it's on a personal nature, suppose that's all a person had in his possession was a donkey. Could that be redeemed? Yes, it's considered unclean, but what had to happen to that unclean animal for it to work? You had to add 20% of whatever the value the priest placed on it, didn't you? So you were still, you were in this redemption thing pretty well monetarily, wasn't you? Good-wise and monetarily. So, did God take this serious? Yes. And so, that's one of the things that we do notice in this. Rules are outlined for consecrating animals and houses to the Lord, including the stipulation for substitution and redemption. Here again, now don't get this mixed up with the ceremonial law. This has to do with vows and promises made to the Lord. It's two distinct, separate laws and entities that we're dealing with here. Consecration and valuation of land, verses 14 through 25. Jeff, would you read that for us?
When a man dedicates his house as a holy gift to the Lord, the priest shall value it as either good or bad. As the priest values it, so it shall stand. And if the donor wishes to redeem the house, he shall add a fifth of the valuation price, and it shall be his. If a man dedicates to the Lord part of the land which is his possession, then the valuation shall be in proportion to its seed. A homer of barley seed shall be valued at 50 shekels of silver. If it dedicates his field from the year of Jubilee, the valuation shall stand. But if he dedicates a field after the Jubilee, and the priest shall calculate the price according to the years that remain until the year of Jubilee, and the deduction shall be made from the valuation. And if he who dedicates a field wishes to redeem it, he shall add a fifth of its valuation price, and it shall remain his. But if he does not wish to redeem the field, or if it is sold, he has sold the field to another man, it shall be redeemed, it shall not be redeemed anymore. But the field, when it is released in the Jubilee, shall be a holy gift to the Lord, like the field that has been devoted. The priest shall be in possession of it, and if he dedicates it to the Lord, a field that he has bought, which is not part of his possession, then the priest shall calculate the amount of the valuation for it up to the year of Jubilee. And then the man shall give valuation on that day as a holy gift unto the Lord. And in the year of Jubilee, the field shall return to him from whom it was bought, to whom the land belongs to as a possession. If every valuation shall be according to the shekel of the sanctuary, 20 jihas shall be a shekel.
Okay, now, this has to do with the consecration and valuation of land. It carries still some of the same thought within it. Instructions are given on the consecration and valuation of land, considering factors such as the year of Jubilee and land ownership was taken into context. Now, the year of Jubilee, what was that about? That was about freeing your servants, freeing any household members that were in servitude to you, any of your brethren in the land, letting the land rest. Of course, they were supposed to do that every 7 years anyway, and they got in a lot of trouble about that in Daniel 2. So this is what's going on here. It was strictly regulated about the consecration and redemption of these lands. Did you notice who it all evolved around? The priest, didn't it? It evolved around the priest and what they would do with the allowance of these things. The sanctification of the firstborn and tithes, verses 26 through 33. I think I'm going to read that because I want to finish this up and we'll move on with it in going into Numbers. Only the firstling of the beast, which shall be the Lord's firstling, no man shall sanctify it, whether it be ox or sheep, it is the Lord. So the firstling belonged to who? The Lord. And if it be of an unclean beast, then he shall redeem it according to thine estimation, and shall add a fifth part thereof too. Or if it be not redeemed, then it shall be sold according to the estimation. So some of this had to do with what? This monetary value on these things, and these things being consecrated to the Lord could be sold, couldn't they? So what was that about? Well, remember that tabernacle and all, and this Levitical priesthood that was coming into being had to be maintained, didn't it? So that's what a lot of this is about when you're making these vows. It's kind of like, maybe this is not a good analogy, but I just thought about it. You know, broad-based, you have federal income tax, don't you? Then you have state tax, and it's all based on what? The individual's ability to do what? Pay, okay? Because the government's got to be maintained at it. And I mean, that may not be a very good way of looking at it, but this is where a lot of that money and things went, was back into the tabernacle treasury with these things when they generated these incomes, and for the upkeep of the priesthood. Notwithstanding, no devoted thing that a man shall devote unto the Lord of all that he hath, both man and beast, and of the field of his possession, shall be redeemed. Every devoted thing is most holy unto the Lord. Now, these are things that a man made the vow, he put up, has, I guess, goodwill. He didn't redeem it. Whatever that redemption period of time is, then that strictly became that of the Lord. It couldn't be redeemed. Okay? Strictly belonged to the Lord. these priests, they really had to have a working knowledge of this law, didn't they? To keep all this in line and in order with these people. So this is what's going on in there. The Lord, it relates the sanctity of the firstborn of livestock and tithes from the land. Guidelines are provided for redemption and substitution. I don't know that I made it to verse 33. So let's go back here, and I'm going to pick up verse 28. Notwithstanding, we just read it, no devoted thing that a man shall devote unto the Lord of all he hath, both man and beast, and of the field of his possession shall be sold or devoted, or redeemed. None devoted which shall be devoted to men shall be redeemed, but shall surely be put to death. So there were some things in this thing that was a strict penalty. Now, this takes on the order that, you try to manipulate this thing and you go against it, that could be dire consequences for this. And we've seen this in other things too, dealing with the Lord on the ceremonial side, haven't we? So when you make these vows and when you make these promises, what does God expect in the end, bottom line? You keep it, right? You go to manipulating with it and you try to do something underhanded with it, carry some serious consequences, could it? All right, let's see. And of all the tithes of the land, whether the seed of the land or the fruit of the tree, it is the Lord's, it's holy unto the Lord. And if a man will at all redeem all his tithes, he shall therefore the fifth part thereof. And concerning the tithe of the herd of the flock, even whosoever passeth on the rod, the tenth shall go wholly unto the Lord. So a tenth part or the fifth part, what was it done? It was set aside special, wasn't it? And when you stop and think and you look at this a lot of times, this is where people get the idea that you're supposed to do your offering into a church, but you're supposed to tithe to 10%. The tithe's over and above the offering. Well, that don't fit in the way of giving, does it, with the Lord, okay? So, but they did these things because one of the things that you have to remember in all of this, when it's all said and done, the priesthood was not going to receive a land inheritance, were they? How would they maintain? This is for the priesthood. This is how they were maintained in all this. So, these are the commandments which the Lord commanded Moses with the children of Israel in Mount Sinai. So, these passages present detailed instructions given by the Lord to Moses regarding the valuation of people, animals, and land when someone makes a special vow or consecration to God. These divine regulations given to the Israelites emphasize the importance of the holiness of offerings and the obedience to God's commandments. These are the commands which the Lord commanded Moses with the children of Israel in Mount Sinai, Leviticus 27:34. And that closes out the book of Leviticus on that note there. You and your brother have any comments on the book of Leviticus? Now, some of this I can tell you already is going to warrant some more study because we've looked at some other passages of Scripture in this. That law was, it was something, wasn't it? Don't you think about trying to keep this law. It was quite strict, wasn't it? One of the things that we're going to get into in Numbers, and we talked about it, and I'm going to have to change out the screen here in just a minute. We kind of talked around it. We maybe talked about it a little bit, about all that sacrificing and moving that tabernacle. And seems like the central theme revolves around the priest, right? How did they get all that done? Well, we're going to begin to see a picture of how the Lord has assigned these tribes on different aspects of keeping this ceremonial law in that tabernacle. So they had help, okay? They had help. They sure did in this thing. So let me turn this thing off and let me reset this on the screen.
You didn't full screen.
Oh.
You didn't full screen.
Oh, thank you, sir. Okay, now we're going to roll over into the book of Numbers. The book of Numbers is going to encompass about 38 to 40 years worth of desert wandering headed to the promised land. A lot of events are going to go on here in the book of Numbers that we talk about and use in Bible lessons and preaching lessons very often. So it's going to be a very interesting book, okay? And, you know, it's mostly going to be dealing with the children of Israel right off the bat, 20 years of age and up, okay? It is filled with history. This particular book is the history of Israel. We find that the book of Genesis itself covers about 2,300 years of biblical history, okay? We find that the book of Exodus covers about 80 years of biblical history. We find that the book of Leviticus, even though it took us a while, covers about a month and a half of history of that law or that portion being given to the children of Israel. And so when we get into the book of Numbers, it covers about a 40-year period of the wandering headed toward the promised land. So there's a whole lot in this, and I thought it was real interesting about these periods here and the period of time it covers. So, you know, so far we're about 2,380 years into this, aren't we? And, you know, we still got a long way to go, haven't we? So with it, so I thought that was real interesting in looking at that. The book of Numbers. Of course, it was written by Moses. The place is what's taking place here is they're getting ready to leave Sinai and they're headed to the promised land. So we're going to hit a lot of points in here about what went on in that desert wandering. And it was a lot. You know, it was a lot the Lord put up with these people. And you're going to find there's a reason that that group of 20 years of age and up, you know, they didn't inherit the promised land, did they? It was only Joshua and Caleb was allowed to go in. So it's kind of interesting when you begin to look at it. Date of history, if you want to date it, this takes place somewhere around 1450 BC, covers about 40 years, which puts it at the end of about 1410 BC, okay? So that's the period of coverage that you have here with it. Name, of course, is derived from the numbering of the children of Israel, and that's how chapter 1 is going to start. The Lord giving Moses direction to number the children of Israel. The book of Numbers begins as the people of Israel and their one-year stay at Mount Sinai and headed into the wilderness on their way to the land God had promised to Abraham. So this is where we're headed with this. The conversations that's going to go on here. I'm going to take time and I'm going to give you a Bible analysis of it. We may get a little bit farther than that, but I'm not. I actually have a... It's kind of like the old, it won't come to me now, Dixon Study Bible. This is a Thompson Chain Reference Bible, and it's set up in kind of the same format as the Dixon Study Bible. It has a lot of information in it pertaining to the Bible and the historical values of the Bible. So what I thought I'd do is take time to read you the overview that has been put together on the book of Numbers. And like I say, I think you're going to find it real interesting when we look at it. I got to ring that buzzer. Okay. As we said, this is the book of pilgrimage to the land of promise, derived from the numbering of Israel. Moses is the author. Central lesson of it, unbelief bars the entrance to abundant life. It bars the unbelief. And this is what they're going to be battling with out there in the wilderness. Moses is going to be battling the children with their unbelief. Leading topics, organization and legislations, chapters 1 through 9. Leaving Mount Sinai, chapter 10, 11 through 12. The discouragement of Moses, chapter 11, 10 through 15. The mixed multitude, loathed the manna, chapter 11, 4 through 6. The 70 elders appointed, chapter 11, 16 through 25. The quail sent, chapter 11, 31 through 34. The jealousy of Miriam and Aaron, chapter 12. Okay, we're also going to see the failure at Kadesh Barnea. The sending of the spies and their report, chapter 13. The rebellion of the people and the curse pronounced upon them, chapter 14. The whole generation doomed, in verse 29, chapter 14. The events connected with the 40 years wandering in the wilderness, chapters 15 through 19. The return to Kadesh Barnea, the sin of Moses and the death of Aaron, chapter 20. The brazen serpent, chapter 21. Balaam, the mercenary prophet, and the corruption of Israel, chapter 23 to 25. The numbering of a new generation, chapter 26. Sundry laws concerning the inheritance offerings and feast and vows, chapters 27 through 30. The judgment of Midian, chapter 31. The assignment of the land east of Jordan, chapter 32. And also the introduction of the cities of refuge in chapter 35. So there's a whole lot going on here, isn't it? In this period of time, wandering in the desert of 40 years. Some of the messianic topics that we're going to be seeing is the smitten rock, chapter 20, the brazen serpent, chapter 21, and the cities of refuge, chapter 35. There's also 7 murmurings that we're going to be covering within this book. Concerning the way that God has chose for them in chapter 11, concerning the food, chapter 11, concerning the giants, chapter 13 and chapter 14, concerning their leadership, chapter 16, concerning the divine judgment, chapter 16, concerning the desert, chapter 20, and the second time concerning the manna, chapter 21. So there's 7 murmurings that we're going to be looking at. So looks like out of that, if you just want to do some raw data on it, you divide 7 into 40, about every 5.5 years, and I don't know if that's the exact time frame, they had a big issue, didn't they, about being out there in the wilderness and God is their leader. So it doesn't look very good, does it? But still, God is preparing them and leading them toward the promised land. Any thoughts on that as I read that? Some of you may have a Dixon. I've got one, but I've got so many notes in this Thompson till I always kind of stick. It kind of does the same thing. You can call this God's roll call in the wilderness. The Lord's censor in Numbers chapter 1. The opening chapter of Numbers sets a tone for the importance of obedience to God's commands and the necessity of organization in the community. It emphasizes how God values everyone in the community, counting each person individually. Even in the wilderness, the people are organized and structured. So what was part of this all about? Getting it organized and getting structured. Without organization and structure, what have you got? Chaos. Okay? God has never wanted chaos, has he? He's always wanted organization and structure. We even see that in the church today, don't we? Organization and structure. Even in the wilderness, the people are organized and structured, each with their individual roles and tasks. Remember we said, well, how did they get all this done? You know, with all this. Well, we're going to see now. We're going to get an organization. We're going to get some structure to this thing to see how it's done. Demonstrating how order and unity under God's leadership can result in a well-structured community ready to face any challenges ahead. The church is so well-structured and organized, can it meet any challenge that lays in front of it? It has so far, hasn't it? Since we just use AD 33, that's the most common thought pattern, okay? And it's 2024, so 1900, whatever that mathematic number is, 1900 and whatever years worth of facing things head on. The obstacle is gone, but what's still here? The church. So there's a whole lot to learn in this book, and I'm going to stop right there and get ready for the worship service. And we'll kind of pick up with Numbers chapter 1, verse 1 next week.